Hey, what's up guys? It's Clint Coons here, and in this video we're going to talk about 6 essential provisions for every tenant in common agreement you're going to be putting together with fellow real estate investors. Okay, let's get started. All right, now what is a tenant in common agreement to begin with? Why are you even watching this video? Well, I have another video on tenant in common agreements, TIC agreements, why they're so important. Check the show notes. I've got a link in there to that video. But to give you a high level, what is a TIC agreement? A TIC agreement is basically a joint venture between two investors or more that have a vested interest, an ownership interest in the underlying asset. So if I went into a TIC agreement with another investor here to do this deal, right? We could structure it, if it's supposed to be 70-30, I would own a 70% interest in the property. This person would own a 30% interest in the property, and it gets recorded on title that way. That's how the property would be deeded to Clint and to investor. Clint as to 70%, investor as to 30%. So the reason why people find this an attractive way of putting deals together is because every person is vested in the property. That is, every person that's part of this deal is going to be vested into the deal itself. So one party couldn't do something without the knowledge or the consent of the other individual. When I mean by do something, I mean like sell the property. So when you put one of these deals together and you're putting together a tenant in common agreement, what you're doing is you're taking title a certain way, but then you're recording a TIC agreement also against the property. So, title would have my name and the investor name on it, but then me and this investor have agreed how this arrangement is going to work out between the two of us. It's a contract between the two of us. So that contract that we determine what the terms are gets recorded on the property, so everyone else knows how this relationship is working out. Now here's where the 6 essential provisions come in. And these are extremely important if you're going to enter into this agreement. It's where you should put a lot of your focus. And it's not all of them, it's not an exhaustive list, but there are 6 areas where I tell people all the time, hey, I want to check these out before we go any further into this TIC agreement to make sure the expectations are met. Now, what is the first one? The first one is you want to ensure that there's no right, to partition the property. What does that mean? Now, this is so crucial, and that's why I put it at number 1. It ensures that one of these tenants right here, or if there's 3 or 4, whatever, one of those people cannot screw up your real estate deal. Let's face it, as real estate investors, we have expectations. Yeah, I'd like that deal to get into the property, get it rehabbed, get it sold within 3, 4, 6 months. But things come up. You know what it is? You start working on the property like, oh, wow, I didn't know we had this problem there. Now, got to fix that. And so things get delayed, can't get contractors out, can't get material. So this is a snowball effect. What should have been done in 6 is now 8, 9, a year out. And you get an investor now that gets a little squirrely, like, oh no, I can't wait. I want my money back now. I don't trust where this is going. So here's what they can do if you don't have this partition agreement in place. One of those tenants right here, let's say this guy right here wants to get out. He can force a sale of the property. I've done it before with individuals. What we do is we go to court and we say, hey, Your Honor, we'd like to equitably partition that property, which means cut it up based upon our percentage ownership. If this guy owns 40% and this one's owns 60%, what do you cut a house at 40% and say, here you go, Clint, we'll deed you the 40% or whatever your ownership interest is. We'll just take a chainsaw right down the middle. That doesn't work that way. Courts are going to say, hey, we cannot equitably divide this property up. Therefore, since we can't equitably divide it, we have to sell it. And so this individual that's sitting over here realizes, all of a sudden they realize, hey, this property is being sold and I can't stop it. I'm not getting the value out of this that I anticipated. I've tied all my money up and this guy pulled the rug out from underneath me. That is why you need to state in your agreement, no tenant may partition this property, move for a partition action. So that stops them from doing this. That's why I put it at number 1. Now, number 2, okay? And so a lot of these can, they can be 2 3s, 3s can be 2s, 2s can be 4s maybe, but no more than that, is management. Okay, who is going to manage the deal? So in this tenant in common agreement, you're going to specify who's in control of the asset, who can make all of the decisions. Now, this is what's key. If I'm going into a tenant in common agreement with someone who doesn't have any experience when it comes to investing, the last thing I want is this person who's never flipped a property before, never made an investment before, to start dictating what we're going to be doing. They walk into the property. You know the way it is. You're doing a rehab and they walk in and they say, you know what? I think we need to go higher end on that. Like, no, I'm here to make money. Okay, this isn't about what you would like. It's about what these buyers will accept and how we'll maximize the return on the investment. So that can happen. So you want to make sure is that all of the decision making with respect to that investment, and you enumerate what those things are, just to be crystal clear, are left to the person who is managing the project. Now, maybe this isn't a flip. Maybe it's a longer term hold. Again, who's going to manage the project? You specify in there. So that keeps busybodies out of the business, that these individuals don't have any knowledge. So I think that's really important when it comes to doing this. All right, the second thing we want to have, or third thing we want to have on here is capital calls. All right, that's really important as well. Now, what do I mean by capital call? Let's assume that we get involved in this project and some unknown issue comes up and we need an extra $40,000. Well, you want to make sure you specify in this tenant in common agreement that each member agrees to meet the capital calls that are determined based upon, you enumerate out the fact, maybe the manager can make the capital call that's required in order to put the deal together. And so that means you have to contribute more money to the deal. So if you bring in a partner here and you need an extra $40,000, this guy's going to be responsible for contributing $16K. 40% of 40 is $16,000. So if he doesn't contribute the money, well, what happens? Either the deal's going to get stalled or you're going to have to make up the difference. Well, if I want the deal to keep progressing, of course, if I have the cash, I'm going to come in and make up the difference. But if I make up that difference, then there's got to be some penalty for this individual on the back end for not meeting the capital call. So you put in their provision that all members must meet their capital calls within 30 days of the capital call going out to the tenant in common members. This keeps the project moving ahead, and it also ensures that those people that make those capital calls on behalf of the other members, you can specify how they are going to be compensated for that. And typically it could be a reduction in their overall proceeds they receive at closing, or however whatever that project looks like. All right, so that's number 3. Number 4. Okay, this is responsibilities of the tenants. What do I mean by that? Well, sometimes when you put these things together, you're going to specify that each tenant, if this is the case, what is required to do certain things. So if I was going to go into a tenant in common agreement with another investor, and one person was going to take on permitting, the other one was going to take on handling the contractors, if that's what you decide to do between the tenants, you're going to split up the overall decision-making or actually responsibilities, then you need to outline those in your tenant in common agreement. So it's crystal clear who is responsible for which aspect of that project. So you want to make sure you get that in there. The 5th one that I would put on there is, I call it go on loans. All right, so here's another issue that comes up. Let's assume that we're in this deal and we need to, either we want to do a cash out refi, or we need to go get more money for the rehab work that's going on because we decided to change the scope of the project. And so we need to borrow $100,000. Well, it's going to be really hard to get a lender to loan you money unless both tenants agree to go on that loan. They're not going to say, all right, I'm going to loan you $100,000, but it's only going to attach to this 60% here, and Clint's going to be the one that has to offer up his credit, and he'll be the one qualifying for the loan. Not going to happen most of the times. They're going to want both tenants. Both tenants have to agree to encumber the real estate because they want to make sure that $100,000 is across the entire property. Therefore, you have to have a provision here that each tenant agrees to go on the loan. Now, what happens if one of them doesn't? Well, if they don't go on the loan, you can't get the project to completion and over the finish line. Well, then there's damages there. So that would then give you the right to sue that person for holding up the project and not meeting their obligations under that tenant in common agreement. So I would specify in my agreements that if there's lending involved or it's anticipated, that each tenant agrees to go on the loan, or at least, go through the lending procedure and try to get qualified, of course, to be on there. But they just can't step back and say, no, I'm not going to do this. All right, the sixth item that I think is really important is called right of first refusal. All right, right of first refusal. So what that means is that if any tenant wants out of a deal, then if they're going to try to sell their interest, and believe me, it's kind of hard to sell these interests if you did want to get out. But let's assume that they found somebody who's willing to buy it. Well, the last thing we want to do is put you into an arrangement, basically like a partnership with someone else that you don't know, and you have to answer to them, or they have certain responsibilities they agree to take on. So if you want to prevent that from occurring, then you better have inside of your agreement a right of first refusal, which means this. If this guy wants out of the deal and he wants to sell it, and he's found a willing buyer, and we know that there's a firm offer on the table, it has to be presented to you first. So you have the ability to match that offer, to come in, step into that buyer's shoes, and close on the buy out his interest. And you can specify the buyout terms. You could specify that if with my right of first refusal, that I'll meet whatever bona fide offer you have. It's 20% down. The rest is going to be financed at 80 months, or not 80 months. I'll say 20 months unsecured. And therefore, you can then purchase that interest. And so you got to be thinking about that as well when you put together that right of first refusal. What does that payout look like to that other party, so that you don't have to come up with gobs of cash? I mean, let's assume that their interest is valued at $800,000. Well, you haven't got $800,000 lying around, and it's going to be hard to get a loan against it. So, but you could, float that for 5 years. So we're going to build in a 60-month loan with 10% down, unsecured or possibly secured against the property. Right of first refusal, crucial to ensure that you don't end up in a ownership scenario with someone you have no idea of what their background is or their understanding of real estate. So those are my top 6 provisions that need to be in a tenant in common agreement. If you're going to go down this road, I think they're great. I really like tenant in common agreements. Make sure you're working with an attorney that understands this stuff, has put these deals together before. At Anderson, we've done this. We work with investors who put these together. You can sign up for a free strategy session if you want to learn more. Check out the show notes there. I've got a link if you want to sign up for a strategy session to discuss whether or not a tenant in common agreement may be right for you. All right, guys, that was tenant in common agreements, the most essential provisions. Hope you found a lot out of that. And be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. Take care.